Talk a little bit about what happened last night, though. Daniel Harris is with us. Daniel, good morning to you. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
Are you starting to believe that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is, in fact, the second coming of the Messiah?
That I thought already, but he's certainly doing a really good job, and it echoes what we've been saying on this show for months, isn't it? Jose Mourinho could not have been getting less out of the players.
We just had a little trouble with the line there, so we'll go back to Daniel in 1 second. But yeah, so those stats that were showing up there, 4 wins from 4, it makes him the best debutant manager since Matt Busby.
Oh, best debutant manager?
Yeah.
Ah, right. Ah, well then, I thought it was in general.
No, yeah. So his debut as Manchester United manager has been the most successful.
Sorry, right? Yeah. That's the stat I thought it was. I thought you meant as in first time manager. It had to be your first gig.
No, because it's obviously not his first gig.
Good point as well. So at what point does he? So the next game, Spurs. And then it becomes 5.
Yeah.
Then it becomes greater than Matt Busby.
But
then who's next? Who's next on his list? Is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the greatest football manager of all time after they beat Tottenham Hotspur?
Like any manager. Well, I don't know. I'd say didn't Pep win something like 10 games in a row or something in his first season? Anyway, let's go back to Daniel. I think we've re-established. We have, yeah, Daniel. So as you were saying, Jose Mourinho. Every passing second that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer exists as the Manchester United manager throws further shade on the career of Jose Mourinho.
I wouldn't say it throws shade on the career of Mourinho, because Mourinho had an amazing career before he came to United, but it is extremely funny that he's come in and immediately changed everything by doing probably very little, by speaking to people nicely, by being positive, and by allowing his players to express themselves. And in a lot of ways, he's the exact repudiation of everything that Mourinho thinks about football and everything that Mourinho stands for in life. And the way that Mourinho worked in the first instance worked very well, because he retained that sense of mischief and that ability to bring people with him. But the kind of second half of Mourinho's career, he's totally lost that. And that's what we're seeing now with Solskjaer, who is not a pushover. He's not just someone who goes around being nice to everyone, people take advantage of him. But he understands that the best way to get the most out of people is to make them feel comfortable in whatever environment they're in. And that's what we see. That's what we see with pretty much all the managers that are successful.
What do we know about what Solskjaer actually thinks about football, though, in terms of how he wants the game to be played? All that kind of that philosophy stuff that most managers come and give a few exclusive interviews to a bunch of hand-selected journalists so that we all get to know, okay, that's actually what you think about the game. What does Ole Gunnar Solskjaer think about the game?
Well, I think he thinks he's very similar to Alex Ferguson in what he thinks and the way that he behaves. I mean, he sounds like Fergie so much of the time when he speaks, just obviously with a bit less he's a bit less scary than Fergie. But he thinks that football is a fast game, is a simple game, and should be played by happy people. And you should always look to go forward. And if you've got one, you should look to get 2. I mean, that's exactly what he said. And he's made almost no missteps whatsoever in the press conferences. Like, everything that he said, and you believe him because he's that kind of nice guy. But if you were writing a script for someone to make Manchester United supporters feel nice about themselves and to make the Manchester United players feel like doing their best, which is obviously very kind of them, you would prepare the script that he has delivered. So I don't think he has too complicated a football philosophy. I wouldn't really even call it a philosophy. Football's a simple game, and being good at football doesn't really require all that much more than getting the most out of your players, picking your best blends, and having everyone nice and happy and relaxed. And he's got some really good attacking players, and he's
Yeah, he's got the formation and the team that played last night. I wonder if Eric Bailly hadn't been sent off, would he still be playing? Is Phil Jones a sub? Is Eric Bailly his first choice? Is last night and the little bit of momentary panic that Phil Jones seemed to bring to the team, is that just a quirk of the red card that Bailly got the previous night out?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think we can see that Lindelof is the first choice, and he probably isn't sure who the next best centre-back is, because it's not really that clear. I think that probably Bailly and Lindelof together would not be the combination that he would go with in the first instance. I think probably if Smalling was fit, it would be him. And then Jones is probably next because, I mean, he's not more predictable than Bailly because you've got no idea what you're going to get from either of them. But he's probably a bit more solid and has a bit more experience. What you see with Phil Jones is basically the finished article now. What you see is the player that he is. whereas Bailly needs games and needs coaching. So I think that he would probably prefer Jones over Bailly, but it's not much of a choice, really, is it? And I think that he'll try and sign a quality centre-back in the transfer window, which is something that Mourinho told us he required, but at the same time undermined the confidence of the defenders and all the players that he had. And I think that one of the major differences is Solskjaer probably knows that his defence is slightly dodgy, so he defends by keeping the ball down the other end and by allowing the opposition to worry about United, whereas Mourinho's way of doing that was by packing the defence, was by packing men in front of the defence and playing in this fearful, reactive way because he didn't trust the defence. And we're seeing at the moment whose way is working better. But, of course, Solskjaer has played for not particularly good teams yet. So it remains to be seen how that works against a better team. But the method certainly worked for Unai Emery for half the season, and his defence even worse than United's. And so I think it is probably the best way of playing with a good defence, because if you don't rate something in your team, then don't rely on it.
Mm. It definitely seems he's got the best out of this bunch of players at the moment, but it also seems he's getting the best out of his backroom team, and it seems like someone like Michael Carrick, who we could see on screen a moment ago, seems to be a lot more involved now under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer than he was under Jose. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I mean, there was a few moments in the final weeks of Mourinho where a couple of set-piece routines worked out, and he was kind of enjoying the moment with Kieran McKenna and with Michael Carrick. And without kind of access to know what's going on, it's hard to make sweeping statements about this kind of thing. But what I do think it is fair to say is the team and the style that we're seeing Solskjaer play is something that Michael Carrick is going to appreciate, because we can see how Michael Carrick played football. Like, he got the ball and he liked to get it forward he could as quickly as possible at the moment. And I think probably the players that he rates, like Martial and Rashford, are the players that we're seeing now in every game. They're fixtures. There are certain players that clearly are going to play in all the games for Solskjaer, unless they're being rotated. They're not going to be dropped or left out after playing badly for 5 minutes. And I think we know enough about what Michael Carrick thinks about football to see that the way that the football is being played now is something more akin to how he thinks it should be played.
The only possible counter-argument is that Lukaku comes off the bench and scores so quickly last night. You want players to believe that they can play their way into the team. Obviously, Solskjaer never managed to really play his way into the team, despite the fact that he was very capable of coming off the bench and scoring goals. So a little bit of a conundrum there.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think the thing that struck me when Lukaku came on was, in that circumstance, Mourinho would have sent on Fellaini. But there will be plenty of games for everyone. Solskjaer was never exactly a fixture, but he still started lots and lots of games. He's famous for being a substitute because some of his most famous goals came as a substitute. But, I mean, he scored more United goals than Andy Cole did, I think. And you don't get that from coming off the bench for 5 or 10 minutes. He still started plenty of games, and United play a lot of games. So I think that if you're a defender, you know what Lukaku's going to do. Whereas Rashford is someone who will keep you running all game. He's quicker than Lukaku. His hold-up play, his touch play is better than Lukaku's. He's capable of a wider variety of finishes than Lukaku, although neither of them are exactly what you call reliable finishes yet. So I think that Rashford is currently the man who's got the jersey, and it will take something significant to take it away from him, because he gives you a lot more than Lukaku does. And a lot of United's best games under Mourinho came when Lukaku wasn't in the team. That doesn't mean that Lukaku doesn't have a lot of improving. He's still available to him, and he's got someone who can coach him to do that, at least until May. But for now, I would always have Rashford. And I think it was quite significant in the Mourinho era that when he needed a centre-forward, Zlatan left. So I think he scored 25 goals, roughly. And so Mourinho needed to replace 25 goals in a team that already didn't score enough. So there weren't that many strikers on the market. There was basically the two that it came down to for him were Morata and Lukaku. And Aubameyang was also around. But what he did was he ended up going for Lukaku, who was a known quantity, scored goals in England before. Whereas a manager with a bit of imagination might have played Rashford at number 9 from then. And although he wasn't someone you wanted to rely on to be your team's main goal scorer at that point, he'd have gone and bought a goal-scoring right winger in a number 10, one or the other or both. And that would have been the way he'd have got around it. He'd have got more goals from around the team by playing in a more attacking style with more attacking options and spreading the burden for the goal scoring around. Solskjaer has now done that. He's getting goals from Pogba, Rashford scoring goals. He's got Martial, he's got Lingard. There's just a lot of goal scorers on the pitch, so that one bloke scoring the goals isn't all that you require. And that was probably something that characterised almost all of Alex Ferguson's teams too. It was only the team that won the league in 02-03 where Van Nistelrooy scored almost all the goals, where you're basically reliant on one person to make sure that you won games. So I think that Rashford will keep playing and Lukaku will get his chances. He'll probably start against Reading and then he'll be out again against Tottenham. And that's what it'll be for Lukaku. And if he can win his place back...
Yeah, we're just having a few problems with the Skype line this morning, which is unfortunate because we've really only one more question left. We might try and re-establish. Yeah, so we'll stick with the Skype line for one more question and see if this makes any sense. You made the point there that Lukaku has a manager. No, Skype's gone.
We're going back in a sec. I wonder, Marcus Rashford's number 9 now, is he? Are we looking at his performance last night, that finish, where he still had a bit to do, and say, through the middle, this guy is outstanding. Like, even in the first couple of moments when he kind of darted through the middle.
Wasn't he always a number 9, defense? Really?
Well, like, that's obviously the easy answer here. But was there not moments of brilliance that he showed, say, on the flanks, where under Jose Mourinho, he had these flashes where you're like, under a different manager in that position, would he be even better than he would be centrally?
So the model is Thierry Henry, right? That's what, like, and so Thierry Henry would pick the ball up deep, but like he would still call him your out-and-out striker.
Like that is what we're basing this off. But I guess when it comes to what makes sense from a Manchester United perspective, is it either side of a striker? If Lukaku ever finds form, that could be the case. I'm not sure. I still think the jury is still out. I think he's been brilliant centrally at the moment, and I think it's definitely leaning, as Daniel says, that way, that he is a number 9.
I have one last question for you, Daniel. We've re-established contact there. So you were talking about Lukaku having somebody who can coach him up for the next 6 months. What does Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have to do before the ownership decides, actually, you know what, you can stick around because you're exactly what we need here?
Well, it's a really difficult situation. He has to do more than beat the rubbish teams that United should be beating anyway, for sure. If he manages to beat PSG, if he manages to finish in the top 4, like let's say those two things, then there definitely will be a question to answer. What I wouldn't be surprised happening is if he were to do a good job, he might not necessarily get the manager's job, but maybe he'll get the director of football job or some kind of technical director job, because I don't think United will just want to throw him away. And the question will always remain is, what happens if he happens to be a really good manager? And it's not just the bounce, it's not just not being Jose Mourinho, it's not just making everyone feel nice in that kind of Carlo Ancelotti way, but actually, what happens if he's really good at this? And I think we'll see that. I wouldn't give him the job if I wouldn't say fluke the Champions League like Di Matteo, because when you win something, it's never a fluke. But Di Matteo managed to win the Champions League in a very particular way, where he had Mourinho's team who knew how to defend, who knew how to protect the lead, and they kind of managed to do it by defending very deep against Barcelona and Bayern Munich and getting away with it. And they won the Champions League that they would say they should have won years ago. I'd say that's probably correct. So if United were to progress in the Champions League, actually playing good football, and you were to see improvement in the players for some coaching and some improvement in the way that they behave tactically, and they were to finish in the top 4, then he would definitely have a pretty decent claim on the job. Because, I mean, when you look at who the other people might be, it's possible that he could do some stuff that Maurizio Pochettino has done, hasn't done. I mean, he would be the favourite. I guess if, let's say, Max Allegri wants the job, it would be kind of hard to give it to Solskjaer above someone who's done as much as Max Allegri has. But at the same time, if he does an amazing job and does some impressive things, you would definitely want to keep him around at the very least. But it's dangerous because United can't afford another bad appointment.
Yeah, I mean, I see the merits of like giving him an opportunity and not spending 20-odd million on trying to get Pochettino in just a transfer fee to help one of your main rivals in English football next season, to just immediately make them a better team. I mean, I know obviously you weaken them by taking away their manager, and so that's a kind of like, you're assuming that they won't be able to get as good a replacement for them. But there's definitely a reason to give Solskjaer if he does well. And I also think that maybe assuming that, or putting the proviso that he has to beat PSG, that might be too much. If this team qualifies for the Champions League by finishing 3rd or 4th, and they play good football for the rest of the season, getting knocked out by PSG, who have Mbappe and Neymar, might not also be a disqualifying factor.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, but what you will need to see is you'll need to see you need to see United beating some proper teams.
Yeah.
It's not simply a matter of beating the teams that talent tells you they should beat almost every time, which they weren't doing under Mourinho, and that's what we've seen so far. If they were to beat Manchester City, if they were to beat Liverpool, if they were to beat Spurs, win some of those games and finish in the top four, then you're starting to make a decent case. If they finish in the top four because Chelsea drop off, and looks like that's what's happening at the moment, they're regressing to the mean. If Chelsea drop off, United beat everyone that they should beat home and away and don't get results in the big games, that's probably not enough. It might be enough to keep Solskjaer around, because why would you not want someone like that around? But I don't think that you could say he made an unarguable case to be manager just by finishing in the top four if it didn't include some pretty big results in it. And you're right, they don't necessarily have to beat PSG. If they don't sign a centre-back who's good in the window, then they've got very little chance of beating PSG. But they need to show that he needs to show that he's able to get proper results out of his players in crucial games, not just get good performances out of his players in the games that you'd expect United to win on talent alone, with or without him, really. That any manager almost you would expect United to beat Bournemouth at home, Newcastle away, and what he's done so far.
Yeah, I mean, best case scenario here is that he does really well, decides that the director of football job is the one that he wants, is involved in appointing the new manager, runs the transfer policy for the next while, and then at some point, if the next manager doesn't really work, you at least have somebody in-house immediately who will always be the permanent manager in waiting if needs to be, or caretaker manager.
Yeah, I mean, you see how some other clubs do it, where they have lots of ex-players involved, and sometimes you hear the ex-United players on television and think, seems strange that all this expertise and all this know-how has just been allowed to go to waste, effectively, to be wasted on television. And you've got someone like Solskjaer who played for Alex Ferguson for all those years, so he knows what it takes to win. He knows he'll have observed what good management is and how it's done. And it's not simply a matter of someone who's good at football. So you've got the first era of Fergie managers, Mark Hughes, Steve Bruce, Brian Robson, who've had varying degrees of success and varying degrees of failure at various levels of football. But someone like Solskjaer, who was around for a bit longer than they were, so he's seen the game change and evolve and seen how Fergie changed and evolved, that's a lot of expertise to allow to leave the club. So you would want that kind of thing around anyway. And I mean, it works quite nicely for Ajax, particularly working really well for them at the moment. It's worked for Bayern Munich also, where you have people who understand, and this whole kind of thing about he gets the club. And I mean, it's a lot of guff, really, because football and football clubs are very simple and all quite similar to one another. But just those very simple values about understanding the kind of football that people want to watch, the kind of football that people should be played. So there should be played in the ability to judge what a good player is, what the mentality of a good player is. That kind of expertise and that kind of groundedness shouldn't be lost. So I think that it's good that they got Solskjaer was the perfect choice, really, for this kind of interim period. And it would be good to keep him around in the same way that I doubt there'll be many complaints if various other figures from United's past came back, the ones that people feel have expertise and are good communicators.
Yeah, and to be fair, we can't actually make a real judgment on how successful the Solskjaer era is just yet. It'll probably be in February and March when they have those crucial games against PSG and Arsenal, Liverpool and Manchester City. But there is a sense that this is sort of reminiscent of what Zidane did at Real Madrid in terms of being a fantastic player-manager, that this seems to be the way forward for football clubs now. If you're in a bit of trouble, get in a manager who's going to steady the ship in terms of a personal level, but it might actually be more than a steady the ship job, that this is actually the future of football, that man management as the manager is the thing to be good at. That is your number one priority, and let your backroom team, let your head coaches, that's a separate role, take charge of tactics and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. But I mean, I think in some ways, it sounds a ludicrous thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, but quite suspicious of Zidane, in that under him, Madrid obviously did amazingly in the Champions League, but they didn't do very much in the league. And you wonder, actually, if it wasn't Ronaldo and Ramos running that dressing room, and he had Modric, and he had Kroos, and he had all these players who were already there, so you wonder exactly what he did. But perhaps that's exactly the point that you're making, and what you said in the second half of that question, is that players these days are just able to manage themselves to a significant degree, and I think that is what a lot of managers want, is they want players taking charge of things in the changing room, and there'll be leadership groups in the changing room, and perhaps that managers are just facilitators. I think there's also perhaps a particular aspect to that Real Madrid squad because they were a squad of stars. So they didn't need so much gelling together because they already had 3 players in midfield who could control the game. They had one of the greatest players we've ever seen, Cristiano Ronaldo, and they had a commanding centre-back, so you could allow them to get on with it. I think with someone like Solskjaer, and you're going to need a little bit more than that because you don't have players that good in every position. But I agree that man management, particularly at the top level, is important because you need to make people feel nice. And as I said earlier on, football is a simple game. But at the same time, you look at other managers who are doing really well. You look at Klopp, you look at Guardiola, you look at Pochettino, and they're doing a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
They're improving the players that they've got, and they're also having them operate in fairly well-defined systems. I don't think it's essential that that is the case because there's lots of different ways to play football, but I wouldn't say that the most important or the only element that you'd want from someone is kind of a bit of inspiration in what they've done before and some man management, which are kind of two things that work together, obviously, because if Zidane says well played, then if you're a player, you feel quite good about that, I'm sure.
Of course.
But there are other managers that are doing really well that are probably really good coaches and who have a bit more structure to the way there's a bit more structure to the way their teams go about things. But there's lots of different ways to play football, and I guess that's one of the reasons why football has conquered the world, because all the ways of playing it are different, all of them are valid, and none of them particularly, I don't think, go out of date if you've got the players to execute them.
Daniel, great stuff this morning. Thanks very much for joining us, Stephen.
See you again, lads.
Daniel Harris there, giving us some thoughts on the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer situation at Manchester United.